Namaste, my friend. Welcome to Bhakti Yoga Conference, Grace in an Age of Distraction. This is hosted at Harvard Divinity School. My name's Happy Jack. I'm the founder of Happy Jack Yoga and a Master of Divinity student here at Harvard. And just so grateful to bring you this program, and in particular today's esteemed guest. And really our opportunity is to bring together scholars, monks, yogis, thought leaders, musicians, scientists, people from different areas within the world of bhakti to share their journey, to share what they've learned, what they've experienced, and to give us ideas and inspiration as we move forward on our spiritual path. As of now, we have over 3,200 registrants for this conference. It just keeps gaining momentum. So thank you for those who are here. Thanks who are here live. Thanks for the majority of you watching the recording. If you have questions, we will open it up at the end for Q&A. But first, I'm going to spotlight our speaker. Well, I read a short bio and share a few words. Please welcome Shaunaka Rishi, who is the director of the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, a position he has held since the center's foundation in 1997. He's a lecturer, a broadcaster, and a Hindu chaplain to Oxford University. His interests include education, comparative theology, communication, and leadership. He's a member of the Commission on Religion and Belief in British Public Life, convened in 2013 by the Wolf Institute in Cambridge. In 2013, the Indian government appointed him to sit on the International Advisory Council of the Auroville Foundation. And there's so much more that could be said. That's a very just snippet of a bio. But I want to say, I feel so blessed that we were initially connected. I have a good friend named Atreya Rishi Das, who's also speaking here, and he connected me with Rukmini, who connected us with you. And now we've learned about all of the amazing work being done at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. I was then, because of you, no doubt, I was invited to a Gaudiya Studies program this past fall, where you were on the faculty. And what really stood out to me was your joy, your lightheartedness, your humor, and just your presence, just really easy to be with. And so I appreciate that. And I really felt, for this conference, the content that you were speaking about was so relevant and so important, particularly on the interreligious dialogue and interfaith communication. I feel it's really helpful for our yoga community. We have Christians in the community, we have Hindus, we have Muslims, people and spiritual seekers. Shaunaka Rishi Prabhu also happens to be longtime, dear friend of Professor Clooney, who is my academic advisor for this project. So many connections. We were talking before. It's beautiful to see how just everything is intertwined. The session for today is titled Bhakti Sans Frontiers, Borders, Barriers, and Bridges. My friends, if you are ready to get started with Shaunaka Rishi Prabhu, please throw your arms in the air and loudly chant Haribol. Welcome, Shaunaka Rishi Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What a wonderful welcome. You're very kind.
Thank you so much for being here. I really feel this is an important conversation, and I'm looking forward to everything you have to share. I wonder if, and maybe you had this planned, but just before fully turning it over to you, would you share a little bit about, or would you begin with what brought you to your spiritual path? What brought you to bhakti? How did you end up here? Because now we see this experienced guy doing this for many decades, director of Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. But at some point, you must have been new in getting started, and help us understand for those of us newer on the path.
Thank you. I I think I'm still new in getting started. I've gathered, a title, director of the blah de blah, but we all know how temporary these things are. How I started this journey, I always wanted to be a priest as a child because I would come from an Irish Catholic background, and that was just that I had two aunts who were nuns. I had a cousin who was a nun in Pakistan, still there after 55 years teaching in Pakistan. So that kind of surrender your life give your life to God was in the family. Um, and as a young teenager, I tried to look for, well, who practices the Christianity in the Bible that Jesus talks about, which was fairly radical stuff. And as a teenager, of course, teenagers like radical stuff. So I was looking for someone who's cutting edge. Um, and I visited a Krishna temple, well, the only Hindu outlet in Ireland. In Dublin, there were six monks, and I was astonished that they were preaching the idea of love of God that I was reading in the Bible, but they just had a lot more to go with it. And the traditions were older than Christianity, and I thought love of God was the Christian gift. And I just realized, well, maybe it's God's gift when we all grab it and put a name on it, you know, give it a passport. Um, but I visited that temple. I went away. I thought about it. I prayed about it, and then I came back and I asked the temple president if I could join the ashram to become a Christian, because I'd visited many monasteries and monks and gone to many prayer meetings, but this was the place I found Christianity really been practiced. And he thought about it and he said yes. And then the next morning at the Mongol Arti, the first service of the day, which is 4:30 in the morning, I came down into the temple room and he had put a little picture of Jesus on the altar.
Mm.
And I really appreciated that. I just thought that's very kind. So that's how my journey started. So, and I did become a priest. I became a Vaishnav priest. Um, so in a sense, I'm an Irish Catholic Vaishnav Hindu. Uh,
Amazing.
yeah, and the idea of bhakti was my driving force really. It was I was trying to figure out what was love. This was the message I was reading in the Bible. Well, it was the message of Hollywood. It was the message of all the books I was reading, all the poetry, all the music I was listening to. They're all talking about this. Love is where to find happiness and fulfillment and joy. And I was trying to figure out what it was. So the idea of bhakti, love of God, was very important for me to understand it. And so it's been a bhakti thing. I never at any stage felt like I converted from Christianity to something else. I've just journeyed on a path and I own that Christian time of that path and I own this Vaishnav time of that path. But
Wow.
the quest is for truth, the quest is for love. And, you know, if I don't start practicing it, then what am I doing? What path am I on? Who do I think I am? Who do I think I'm kidding? So, so that's kind of the journey.
Beautiful. That's so powerful. I'm just the way that you articulated that, and I'm just looking at, I know many of the people in the chat in the Zoom room here with us, and they're, similarly, they feel very connected and grateful for their Christian roots and still consider them very much consider themselves Christian. And so I just love the way that you can, still own that part of your life, that part of your identity. And I think that comes through in your work. The way when we pass it over here in a second, um, man, if more of the world had that mindset and that mentality, it'd be a different circumstance right now. So thank you for sharing that.
You're kind to say that. I'm still honing the mentality. It's takes the time it takes. I like gardening, and I was always impressed with people who planted oak trees because if I plant an oak tree, I won't see anything in my lifetime, even if I planted it at the age of 20. It's like be that size. But my children will see something not very impressive. Their grandchildren will see something that actually looks like a tree, but their grandchildren will see something that's actually very beautiful. And then that will go on for a number of hundreds of years from there. So who plants oak trees? So what kind of thinking do we have to really help the planet? How detached do we have to be from ourselves that we're thinking about others so much that we'll do something now that gives us no reward at all. And I suppose that's where I wanted to start actually. And I'm sure you have so many people, so many wonderful people in this conference. I'm amazed at the names. You may have heard this before, but in the Bhagavad Purana, in the second chapter, there's a. When I was young in the ashram, I read this and I was really struck by this verse because it really defined religion and defined spirituality and defined love. And that's a difficult difficult thing to do. So it's and the Sanskrit, it's early in the morning for a lot of you, so early morning is a great time for a bit of Sanskrit. So I'll give you the Sanskrit. It's Savaipum Samparo Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Adhokshaje Ahoitaki Pratihata Yayatma Suprasidati. So Savaipum Samparo Dharmo, the ultimate thing for all humanity is to uh, Savaipum Samparo Yato Bhaktir Adhokshaje is to achieve love for Adhokshaja, for the Lord. Ahoitakiya Pratiyata, this love should not be interrupted or motivated. It means you expect no return, and it's not something we do on Tuesday evenings or Wednesday mornings. It's consistent. Then Yayatma Suprasidati, the Atma, the self, thus becomes fully satisfied. And I particularly liked the last bit because it says that you have to be able to know that the process is working. And how is it working? Is you become satisfied inside yourself. And so that was anyway, I just loved it because what's the supreme thing for any human to do? It's is absolutely not sectarian, and it's not political, and it's not to do with what football team you support or this is the thing to do, and is to understand how to love God. And if that love, and it defines love so wonderfully, if it's not interrupted and it's not motivated, and I realized that all my attempts to love at that stage, I before I joined the ashram, I had a very lovely girlfriend, uh, blonde and blue eyes and everything picturesque that we could imagine, and a lovely personality to go with it even. My wife joked one time when she was a student at university in the ladies' toilet, someone had put graffiti up. He loved me for my mind, and obviously a joke. So, so as a young man, I mean, what did I see? And I loved my girlfriend, I loved my family, but I didn't love these guys, or and I was a little iffy about those. And I realized that love meant there was no motivation. But when I went to my girlfriend with flowers and chocolates, I expected a return on my investment. And it wasn't love. And I was just so shocked at myself. And I didn't see it because all the Hollywood movies told me that, that was fine. That was good. That's fair enough. That's how you negotiate the world. It's a business deal, but that's not love. So this really woke me up to what love was. And then, am I a person who can act without expectation of return? And that was a very personal challenge, has been, continues to be a personal challenge. How do you become that person? And I just realized I'm only into the second chapter of this book, and this book is this one verse of 14,500 verses. So where am I going? How many other challenges am I going to meet? And the Bhagavad Purana is really about bhakti. It is the book of bhakti without doubt. And it is, strangely, it's the most influential book in Indian culture. And a lot of people don't know that, but the Indian scholars they all attest to that fact, that this book has been the most influential. It's been translated into every vernacular language. It's influenced art and music and poetry and drama. All the Indian festivals come from it. The idea of the worship of the deity comes from it. So, and all the stories of Krishna comes from it, which have been very influential. So, so that's where I thought I'd start by just giving a definition of bhakti. This is one that really meant something to me as a young kind of partly Christian, partly Vaishnav at the time. And the book is the Bhagavat Purana or the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's called both Bhagavat Purana or Srimad Bhagavatam. Um, so I wanted just to then go a step back to another book. This is the Mahabharata is a huge volume, absolutely massive, much longer than the Bhagavad Purana. Bhagavad Purana is 14,500 verses. The Mahabharata is 120,000 uh, verses. It's a different order, but stuck in the sixth Parvan of the Mahabharata is one chapter called the Bhagavad Gita, which a lot of us will have understood. And the Bhagavad Gita is kind of considered high school study of bhakti. The Bhagavad Purana would be your graduate work. Um, but I want to talk about the Bhagavad Gita because it exemplifies something very interesting for us in terms of bhakti and its relevance. Uh, Arjuna's on the battlefield. He asks Krishna to pull the chariots between the two armies. He looks at everyone there. Um, and he realizes that when he fights this battle, he's going to lose everyone he loves on both sides because it's a family war. And he just thinks this is the worst option ever. And this is a good man. Only a good person would think like that. The warriors on the other side are not thinking like that. And he has a panic attack, and all the symptoms are of a panic attack. And he turns to Krishna and asks Krishna for help. So when Krishna smiles a little bit and starts to help him, and his first text of teaching is Na tuevaham jatunasam na tvam nime janaripa na chaiva na bhavishvava sarvevayam atakparam. He says, never was there a time when you did not exist, nor I, nor all these kings on the battlefield, nor in the future will any of us cease to be. So this is basic Vedanta philosophy, that the self is eternal. We have the body, which is a temporary part, is part of ourselves, but only for a while. Our mind is changing every 5 minutes. Happy, now I'm frightened, now I'm sad. And the intellect changes every time we read a book or see a film or have a conversation. But the part of us that doesn't change is the part that Krishna is addressing. And he's saying, realize who you are before we have this conversation. And then he starts to give Arjuna all the choices that he has, every choice. And he's the first choice he gives him is, if you don't fight, you realize people will laugh at you. I mean, you're the principal warrior on one side of the battlefield. The conch shells have been blown, which means the battle has technically started. So if you back out now, people are just going to laugh at you. Now that's a purely materialistic reason to fight or not. And then he opens up in the middle 6 chapters about bhakti. So in the first 6 chapters, he hardly talks about the idea of God. He's talking about Arjuna and Arjuna's relationship with the world. Arjuna has to understand himself first. And then he opens up in the middle 6 chapters about himself and who he is and reveals himself eventually to Arjuna. And then in the final 6 chapters, he kind of ties this all up. He brings this back to the world again. But all throughout, he's giving Arjuna all kinds of choices. He makes it clear what he thinks Arjuna should do. But in the end, he says, now deliberate on what I have said fully and do as you wish. The word he uses is icha, do as you desire. Let it be your desire. And this is such a wonderful example of teaching, of counseling, of pastoral care, or just care, concern. of how to deal with a person by leaving them their choice. Now, it's the the text is called the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God. We could say a merciful God would just solve his problem for him. Just say, Arjuna, just do this, do it now, done, solved. But Krishna doesn't do that. And 7 times in the Gita, he says to Arjuna, he says something to him and says, this is my opinion. So he's leaving it optional. He's just saying, this is just my opinion. But God's opinion would be considered fairly valuable, but he's leaving it to Arjuna to see the value in it. And in the end, he gives him this choice. And why is that important? Because in the beginning, he said, never was there a time when I didn't exist, nor you. Therefore, Arjuna was never born. He exists eternally, which means Krishna didn't create him. He's not the creator God. He created the material parts, the body, the mind, the intellect, and we are duty bound to give gratitude for that, but we're not duty bound to love him. So this is the philosophical basis for love, love of God. And this is important for us to understand that this text has taken what we look on as Upanishadic philosophy, which is often interpreted rather impersonally, and brought it into create the basis for a personal relationship with God. And that's why he gives him his freedom at the end, because he's established that freedom at the beginning. And that's the freedom to love, because love can only be love if it's absolutely freely given. There's no compulsion on him to love Krishna in this context. So this is why it's the Song of God, because God is giving him the one thing that he has, which is choice, which is his desire. Everything else can be manipulated in all kinds of ways, but his desire is his alone. And Krishna gives it to him. And when we look at that, and I think Jack will have heard this analogy before, but I find it useful. If my wife and I never had children, but I know that if I had a girl child, I would be the worst father ever. I would have a shotgun. Well, and any boy who looked at her, I know what young boys are like. so, so I know what's going on here. I wouldn't let biology take its course. God, no. So what would I do? She comes to me and she says, I'm going out with my friends. We're going to stay out all night. First time she ever said anything like this. What would my response be? That, no drugs, no sex, no alcohol. You're going to ring me at 10 o'clock. You're going to ring me at 12 o'clock. You're going to ring me at 4 o'clock in the morning. I ain't got her, etc. But if I was to approach it like Krishna, what kind of response would I have to her? She's a young woman. She's growing up. She's stretching out in the world, establishing her identity. Would I sit down and give her all her choices and say, some people are going to offer you drugs. Some people are going to offer you sex. Some people are going to offer you alcohol. And what do you know about drugs? And have a conversation about it and give her my opinion and then seek her opinion and her questions. Arjuna asks a lot of questions in the Bhagavad Gita. It's a conversation between two people. It's a dialogue. It's not a download. So if she goes to the party and someone offers her a little white pill and says, take this is really good, you'll have fun. And she says, what is it? Oh, it doesn't matter what it is, it's really good. She'll say, no, what is it? Why? Because she's thought about it and she understands there are consequences. And the same with sex, and the same with alcohol or whatever else we're afraid of that we need to warn her about. But you give her all the options and discuss all the options so that she's thought about it and she has choice. And that's empowering someone. And that's just looking at how Krishna has established the Gita. So here is God being asked to help someone and exemplifying how bhakti works. It's not dogmatic, it's not doctrinaire. It's a relationship between two people where both people are equally respected. And God in this context is Arjuna's friend. even though he's been asked to be his teacher, he actually does it in such a friendly, open way that in the end, Arjuna chooses to fight. Why? Because of religion, dharma, or philosophy, gyan, knowledge? Or no, he chooses to fight because he loves his friend. And this is what his friend would like him to do. Having been given all the other choices, this is what he chooses. It's a very powerful example of how love works from a philosophical basis. When Arjuna is being asked to question, he's not just being given an answer, the undeniable answer, the inarguable answer. No, he's being asked to question everything that our Krishna says. And he does question. And he asks very intelligent questions, probing questions. And Krishna takes every question seriously and answers it fully. That's what makes it such an interesting dialogue. Now, it's also interesting that Sankaracharya has real difficulty proving Advaita Vedanta from this text, yet insists that every Acharya has to write a commentary on the Gita. It's just too important a text. It's too radical a text because it's taking philosophy and linking it to theology, which in the West we can't do that anymore. These faculties are separate things that hardly ever talk to each other or take each other seriously. But in the East, you can't separate your head and your heart. It's just not done. And the texts are there to show how it works, how you have to use your head with your heart to try and be a bhakta without a philosophical basis is to be a sentimentalist or even an extremist, someone you can't argue with because there's no rational basis, or to be just a philosopher without bhakti is dry detachment. Whereas the heart side, we can't exist without both. There's a balance to be drawn. And the whole Indian intellectual process is about balance. The whole culture is about balance. We see that very specifically in yoga, but we see it in Bhakti Yoga as well as Ashtanga Yoga and Dhyana Yoga, Jnana Yoga. In every one of them, we have to maintain a balance between our and with our identity, our own personal identity, as well as with our identity with the Supreme. So again, it's interesting. In the first 6 chapters of the Gita, Krishna only talks about who Arjuna is and what Arjuna is doing and can do, and doesn't talk about him being God at all, because it's not relevant until Arjuna understands himself. And once we're established in our identity, then we can have a relationship with others. And again, this is fundamental to an understanding of bhakti. And so when we look at this in dialogical terms, so I'm a Krishna Bhakta, Krishna in Vrindavan to be very specific. I just love Krishna. I haven't found an image of God and an idea of God that's more godlike than a little blue child. That's pretty radical. It's very difficult not to love a child, as is proven in all the wonderful stories about Krishna. And it's not, we don't expect the powerful one to be a child. That's generally the old man, who old means wisdom and power and maturity. But no, there's this child who has no obligation, no duty to perform. And that kind of sounds like God to me. I get that. But that's not everyone's idea of God. That's just what I've come across and what I can dedicate my heart to. But I have friends who are Christians and Muslims and Jews and Advaitins and Sri Vaishnavas and from all different places. And they're my friends because they're sincere in their desire to develop good qualities and to develop their relationship with God. And they have a different idea of God, but that's not very important to me. Because I'm looking at this text from the Bhagavatam, Savaipum Samparo Dharmo, and I see them practicing it. And I I just look at some of the relationships I've had. Um, the Reverend Kenneth Cracknell, he was a Methodist minister, the president of the Cambridge Theological Federation, wonderful, wonderful person. He was my mentor in interreligious dialogue. So I invited him to our temple on an island in the middle of a lake in Ireland, lovely place. And he stayed there for a week. And I arranged some lectures for him because he was a very well-known guy. So some of the universities were very happy to have him. But on the whole, he was on our temple. And he used to come every morning at 7 o'clock to the Arctic at 7 o'clock. And um, one morning, one of the cows on the mainland, we had a farm on the mainland, one of the cows had a calf. And the farmers took the calf that was just born in a blanket, rowed it across the lake, brought it up to the temple, and were there just in time for the Arctic. The curtains opened, the deities were there, and they offered the calf to the deities. And he saw this wonderful sign of communal affection, that the whole community was welcoming, blessing this young calf and offering it so that God would see this calf and give blessings as well. And I was walking down with him down to his cottage, and I said, so how are you getting on with your visit? And he said, oh, Shaunaka, I find it very challenging, very challenging. And he had a big smile on his face. And I was trying to think, that's a strange word. What do you mean by challenging? And he said, well, I come here and I come to this, I see this calf being offered to the Lord, and I see this love in your community. And I have to think, what's special about my relationship with God? And I just thought that was so honest and so humble and wise. And he really taught me something very valuable about my practice. What makes my practice so special in the same vein? So you meet someone of that caliber in a completely different religion. Or my other friend, Brother Owen de Bratton, I was a 20-year-old brahmachari in an ashram, kind of a celibate student, and he was a Cistercian monk in a monastery in Ireland. And he was in his 70s. And I used to go and meet him regularly, and he used to chat with me. He treated me like an equal. And he had a shaven head and wore robes, and I had a shaven head and wore robes. And he was a vegetarian, and I was a vegetarian. And he got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So he bet me on that one. And he said prayers for 2 hours, and his prayers were just praise of God. He wasn't asking for anything, which is bhakti. And I chanted for 2 hours, and then he read scripture, and I read scripture, and then he served God all day, and I served God all day. So what was so different? And I had to, just by associating with him, without him saying anything, he was helping me reflect and think and go deeper into myself as a person. He wasn't trying to challenge me in any aggressive way. He wasn't trying to proselytize. He was just being friendly and kind. And that's the mood of a Vaishnava. So this was a bhakta. Kenneth Cracknell was a bhakta. That's what I saw. And by their association, I was able to reflect. I was just a young man, but these older people took me under their wing and were just very kind to me. And the fact that they were a different religion wasn't important. It was their practice, their principles, their values, and the virtues that arose because of them gave me the example I needed to inspire me to try and be like that within my tradition, and to find essentially what's important about my tradition. Maybe I should just become a Methodist or a Catholic Cistercian monk. Why should I stick with this path? But they made me go deeper, and I always found some deeper place, which was just encouraging. So the idea of bhakti in the title Sans Frontières, there are borders, but I didn't find any barriers. The border was, I'm attached to Krishna in Vrindavan. But it wasn't a barrier to me having a conversation or a relationship with someone who was dedicated to Jesus Christ in Nazareth. And I understood their thinking. and they understood my thinking at heart. The specifics weren't really as important. Every time I met those people, I would relax within myself because I knew I was among friends. Now, interestingly, I didn't have the same relationship with everyone in my temple. I could, some of the people in my temple were just rabid fanatics, sorry to say. Uh, in fact, I was one of them. So, and, we developed and all that. And most people uh, who practice religion, according to in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that I quoted, is very interesting discussion about stages of development of faith, that most people who practice religion are fanatics because they don't understand much about it. They don't read much about it. They go to the temple or the synagogue or the church or the mosque um, when they get, born, when they get married, and when they die. That's the main time that they think about anything religious. Otherwise, they're just piddling on with life, and that's what life is about for them, and which is fine. That's what life is about for most of us. It's a hard struggle just to keep going, just to pay the taxes, and find the money for that, and feed the children. But for some people, there's more to it. And when you meet those people of any tradition, you find like-minded people, and it's much easier to have a conversation. And that's where you find the heart of the bhakta. So in that sense, that's, for me, is where the bridges are. That's where we can actually start to cross over. And if we go back to the Gita and the Upanishads, where it talks about the idea of the spiritual energy that we call life, then that energy is extra special. And in the Gita, it talks about the idea of samadarshanaha, equal vision. The sage sees with equal vision the elephant, the dog, the Brahmin, because he sees the energy of life in all of them. And this life is just a spectacular energy. This is the spiritual energy. This is who we really are. But this equal vision means that everyone is appreciated for who they are. The idea of the Anjali Mudra, to say namaste, is to offer respect to the spiritual energy within us, not just our body or our mind, which may or may not be worthy of respect, but always our spiritual energy, our very self, our life force is worthy of respect. So this idea that we can have that equal vision means that there should be no barrier. There should always be a bridge. And then if I look at it, so that's looking at it from a Vedantic point of view. If I looked at it from a Bhakti point of view, then my relationship with the Supreme is a relationship of love. So I've gone to the source of love to understand how to love. And if I just have a little experience of that, then I can learn how to love everything connected with the Supreme, which is everything and everyone. So again, like Samadarshanaha, when I look at anyone, I look at someone who is not simply just a spiritual being, but a spiritual being who has a connection with the Supreme, the person I'm trying to love. Therefore, I should be trying to love here too. Whatever little experience of love I have, I should give it away immediately to this person who is equally connected with the Supreme. So again, the idea of building bridges, of breaking down barriers, of understanding the fluidity of borders becomes very important. That borders are helpful to understand where we are ourselves as individuals. I have my borders based on my principles. I believe in ahimsa, and I know that Krishna doesn't like killing, so I'm a vegetarian, and that curtails my life in some way. They're my borders. They're personal to me. But those borders aren't a barrier to sitting down with my friend Ajay, who is a Brahmin, and he claims to be a non-practicing vegetarian. And that's just how he thinks about life. but he's still my friend. And I really appreciate his honesty that he's not against the principle of vegetarianism. He just can't get it together to practice it, which is very honest. But he's a very decent guy otherwise. So how can we learn to love? How can our borders not become barriers? And how can we always see the possibility of building bridges? Bridges have to be met halfway, but we can always build the part that we can build. It can always be ready to receive. And that's the essence of bhakti, is relationship, the capacity to have relationship, the willingness to have relationship, the willingness to take the risk of relationship, because relationship is all about trust. And trust takes time to develop. And it starts with a little confidence that develops into a little faith. But that faith develops into trust, and that trust develops into love. We have to create that pathway to love. We have to be someone that people can have confidence in. We have to be someone that people can have faith in. So we have to be able to declare ourselves, our principles, who we are, what we hold dear, and that those things we hold dear are solid. We don't change it every 5 minutes. I don't know if you've heard, I'm sure some of you have heard of Groucho Marx, the famous American comedian. And he came out with really funny one-liners. He said, I got principles, and if you don't like them, I got other ones. And we don't want to be that guy. He was telling a joke. It's meant to be a joke, so we're not supposed to practice it. We have to have principles that we can declare to people, and they are our principles and they don't change. That's the basis of trust. And based on those principles, we develop virtues. And those virtues are what people depend on. They depend on us to have those virtues. If we practice ahimsa, then ahimsa is actually negative. It's not harming. The positive is karuna tatikshava. It's compassion and tolerance. You develop the virtues of compassion and tolerance by practicing ahimsa, by being vegetarian, by not engaging in physical violence, by being very careful how you speak to people, that you don't hurt people with your words, which can be much more injurious than physical violence. And even moderate our thoughts. Be careful how we think about people in case we say something that's going to hurt someone. So it's a very subtle practice, but it leads to compassion, to thinking differently about the world we live in, to be very tolerant of others because we realize how tolerant we have to be of ourselves, to be compassionate with others because we have to be compassionate with ourselves. And if we can begin to act like that, then the possibility of love exists. Love is a journey. It's not a concept. It's work that we have to do. And it has to be demonstrable. It has to be something that people can see us trying to do, and then they'll trust us. And based on that trust, love can exist. And that's just love between us. Bhakti is really not about love between us, it's about love of God. If we have developed love of God to any extent, then we can share that love with others. That's a selfless love. We've learned what selfless love means in that relationship with God, because the Supreme is the only person who doesn't want anything from us. The reason why our relationships in this world are so transactional is because we're all transactional. Just our nature. God isn't transactional. He doesn't want anything from us. So we can trust him implicitly. And if we can experience that in a relationship, then we can have that relationship with others. So that's why the idea of bhakti, of sharing love with God, is so important in our capacity to love others. It means that our love of others becomes something that is reflected from the Bhagavad verse that I quoted. So that kind of takes us in a full circle from where we started back to that verse. And I thought if leave time for questions, because there's so many people on this call, there must be lots of questions. Jack had said leave 10 minutes, but I think if we leave a little bit more than 10 minutes,
Yeah.
it could. It'll be interesting.
Well, beautiful. First of all, Prabhu, thank you so much. We're sending all our love and appreciation and gratitude. What a beautiful, wonderful conversation, and um, just the way that you speak and articulate it really made sense, and a lot of things really started to click for me. As Prabhu said, we'll take some questions. I wanted to open up with one, if I may. When I was able to study with you there at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, one of the documents that we got to read with you was the ISKCON Interfaith Statement, and there was a section on principles and guidelines for approaching people with faith in God, which I really appreciated that document, and we've shared it with our yoga community. And just a personal experience. I'm actually visiting my parents right now, and so last night I've got a few Krishna things around here in the room. My dad came in last night. So yeah,
I just say one thing. I really appreciate your parents' house behind you. Looks really
yeah. I know it's spring break, but I'm still bringing the Harvard vibes. So last night my dad comes into my room. I've got some Krishna pictures up, and first he says, "Who's that girl?" And I said, "Well, actually, that's a little young boy. What's his name? That's Krishna." And then he started going, "Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare." Like he didn't have it quite right. I was like, he'd had a few drinks, to be fair, but I was just like, wow, I'm just so impressed that. So that was a really nice experience. This morning, my mom saw some of these photos, and she said, why do you have those Hindu gods in this house? This is a Christian house. And so, that's a sensitive topic that my mom and I navigate together. And I'm very, I'm maybe because I'm not 20, I'm, in my 40s, I'm very sensitive and kind of keeping a nice relationship with her. But I guess I wanted to ask you, these principles and guidelines for approaching people with faith in God. And one of the distinctions was that, which I love, that no individual or organization has a monopoly on God. And I think that's a beautiful idea. I guess just maybe suggestions that you have, because there'll be some people on this call who are new coming to Bhakti, and they may have some hesitations or reservation. And then there's also those of us here who have like come to love Bhakti, but we're interacting with perhaps our Christian family or a different, from a different path.
Mm.
How you did speak about this really well today, but I guess anything else you might offer practically how to approach these
Yeah.
circumstances.
Well, I mean that quote you gave from that interfaith statement, it's only from the Bhakti traditions. Now, the thing is, I would interestingly include Christianity and Islam in the Bhakti traditions, in spite of their objections. but but I do think that the statement that no individual or institution has a monopoly on truth. We all think we do, unfortunately. Um, but only God has a monopoly on truth, because only God has a capacity to understand truth. God is the embodiment of everything true and good and pure and loving, and we're not. so, so we're totally dependent on our relationship with God to understand anything. And in the Gita, when Krishna manifests the universal form, how he manifests in this world. So this is only a fraction of who he is. Arjuna sees past, present, and future at the same time. And that's actually impossible. But it's not impossible in that world. And Arjuna just goes, "Oh no." So no, take it away. I can't handle that. I can't handle that. And that's what it is for all of us. What is it? Jack Nicholson in a famous film, you can't handle the truth. It's good.
Few good men, yeah.
Yeah, you good man. Yeah, you can't handle the truth, and it is like that. We actually can't handle the truth. Well, God is the only one who understands truth, and the rest of us, we all claim so many things, that this is the right path, this is the right scripture, this is the right founder, this is the right guru, and it's right for us, and we can't say it's right for anybody else. And if we're turned on by it and inspired by it and guided by it, and it's all good, that's fantastic for us. We've been given a great mercy. We've been given grace, and we should accept it gracefully and deal with other people gracefully, and not freak them out by insisting that they follow what we follow, because we're all individuals. if Krishna says to Arjuna, we're all eternal, you, me, all these kings, he's saying you're all individual eternally. That means there are as many religions on this call as there are people. There are as many worldviews and philosophies on this call as there are people, because we all have an individual relationship with God, or not, as the case may be. So we can't impose ourselves on others or make these truth claims. And for someone like your mother, I don't know your mother, but it can be very, with my mother, let's put it that way. She was very threatened by me getting involved in something else that she didn't understand. And she said I couldn't speak to the other children, my brothers and sisters. And, for a couple of years, I was a persona non grata a little bit, because she was just afraid. And it was just fear based on ignorance. And it wasn't based on the fact that she knew better. It's based on the fact that she didn't know at all. I just pulled the rug out from all her certainties. And we have to be very mindful of that, very sensitive to that. We don't want to do that. She has an idea of God that's very precious to her. And it's very important that I don't unsettle her, because what she has is precious. And it would be very lacking in love to do that. So I think we have to be very careful in we find something wonderful and then we bring it home. It's like a cat bringing home a dead mouse. It's like, from the cat's point of view, it looks great, but everybody else is a bit freaked out. So we have to be careful. Maybe wrap it up in a bag and have it in your room. Keep it simple.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. It was very helpful. Um, but I see we got a question on deck. Let's get Sarah and George, who happen to be in the same country, in the UK. Welcome.
UK, not Ireland.
UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Shaunaka Rishi is in the UK. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Just up the road then. We're down in Kent, so not far. I guess going from that question, we're very much in this as well. We're quite new to Bhakti. I'm a bit more in than George. He's kind of put his toes in, but I'm a little bit further into kind of Krishna Bhakti than he is, which is great, no problem. But my parents and his mother are all atheists, and that's how we used to be. We were brought
But
up.
we all grew up in a
We grew
Christian
up kind of in a Christian
background,
environment, but nobody really believed in it. It was kind of Christian schools, but we sung the songs, liked the songs, but didn't really buy anything. I've got the Srimad Bhagavatam on my mantelpiece, and we're kind of going to the temple a little bit, and we're talking about it, but not very much, but only kind of with reincarnation. And we're getting some kind of, in fact, I had a conversation with my daughter, and apparently my mum and sister have had a conversation of freaking out slightly about what we're doing. And I need to sit down and have a conversation with them. And I guess I was just after some advice, really, because, I don't know, they're probably threatened. They think it's weird. They probably think it's a massive cult, because we're kind of going down the ISKCON route. So any words of advice?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a sensitive thing. You just have to be sensitive to their needs and interests and concerns. These are your parents and they love you and they have your best interest at heart. And they're going to be quite convinced that their best interest is the one that you should accept.
Yep.
And you're going to have to negotiate that as a loving child. I remember when I was a young kid in the back of the car driving home from my grandparents' house, and my mother complaining bitterly that at the age of 32, their parents still didn't allow her smoke in the house. So
you're always a child, aren't you, to a
you're
parent?
always a child, and you just accept that. And it's very good that your children see you act like that with your parents, that you're very respectful. So accept everything they say, nod your head, and do as you wish to do, like Krishna says to Arjuna. So, they're going to give you all the options, and you're going to say, "Oh, thank you very much. That's very good advice. Thank you very much." And then go and lead your life, because they don't actually lead your life, and they don't live with you anyway. So,
Yeah.
you'll get away with it.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
sometimes,
we know that they'd be coming from love. You know, they would be concerned for us rather
yeah,
than thinking that, you know, that we worry we'd be hurting ourselves, you know, or
yeah,
our family. So,
yeah. And if they think it's a cult and you're brainwashed and all that kind of stuff, you can deal with that. I dealt with that with my mother. I said that for a couple of years. After 2 years, I sat down with her and I said, look, I'm doing this now and I'm pursuing the truth, and this is what I find enthuses me. And I could be doing something else in 5 years' time. I don't know.
mm,
But this is what I'm doing now.
yeah,
And at the moment, it looks like if I get married to someone, it's possibly going to be someone who does this kind of thing. And we're going to have children. And I want you to be their grandmother. So can
yeah,
we get on, please? Now, when I spoke like that to her, she understood I wasn't brainwashed.
yeah,
She understood that this was me making decisions and I still have critical faculty. You
mm,
just have to continually reassure them and reassure them that you're making your decisions and just have a smile on your face and that you love them and they have access to your children. Push comes to shove.
mm,
They're all the issues. And if they're atheists, that's fine. My father-in-law was an atheist and I just chose not to talk to him about atheism after the first 2 times.
mm,
And I never talked to him about reincarnation and karma or anything, because interestingly, you know, when you're Abrahamic, you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and you talk to a Hindu, then you start talking about karma and reincarnation, because that's kind of what you nearly know about. For the Hindu, they start talking about karma and reincarnation. This is something that Hindus and Buddhists and Jains and Sikhs are not interested in. What do you
right,
want to get away from? Karma and reincarnation. So this is the thing everyone gets absorbed in and has a big conversation about, the thing that none of them are interested in.
mm,
They're all interested in the idea of love. Everybody on the planet is interested in the idea of love. So why not talk about that? And just make it comprehensible.
yeah,
And if you can quote the Beatles and say, money can't buy you love, and just keep quoting all the things about love that are all eminently good quotes about love,
mm,
then you're just making reference points. But karma and reincarnation aren't reference points. People don't understand it.
yeah,
Even when you explain it, everyone has problems. So I would just keep it simple. And bhakti is about love.
yeah,
And so if that's the subject, then talk about love, and you'll find commonality, you'll find comprehension, and it'll just be easier.
yeah.
And all the other things are going to be full of Sanskrit words that,
They don't need to talk about. No.
yeah, just freak them out again. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That was really useful.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent response, excellent question and response. Let's send our love and appreciation, Sarah and George, Kent, UK, representing. Thank you so much.
I'm too old.
No, it's all good. My goodness, that was such a beautiful session. I want to be respectful of time. This easily could continue, but Shaunaka Rishi Prabhu, thank you so much for being here with us today, for gracing us with your presence. I look forward to connecting again and sharing your wisdom with our greater community. Friends, thank you for being here live with us, and those who are watching the recording. We'll have another session in an hour if you happen to be available. And until we meet again, wishing you an amazing rest of the day. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
So much. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very
Hare
much.